Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Ruchi Gupta with me today. Ruchi is a professor of pediatrics and medicine at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine and a clinical attending at Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. She has more than 15 years of experience as a board certified pediatrician and health research and currently serves as the director of the Science and Outcomes of Allergy and Asthma Research Program. With the help of her research team, she has determined the prevalence of childhood food allergy in the US and the pediatric management of both food allergy and asthma and improving the quality of life for children and caregivers. She has over 100 publications, is featured on the Netflix series Rotten Episode 2, and has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, NBC Nightly News, and many more. Ruchi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me and for that very kind introduction, Arnav.
Of course, thankful to have you on. So, take us back to the beginning, where you grew up, what your family situation was like, what type of kid you were, things of that nature.
Wow. Okay. Questions I haven't thought about for a long time. It's almost like a therapy session too. Here we
Yeah.
go. All right. So take you back. All right. So I was born in India, actually, in Lucknow, but I moved to the U.S. when I was 2. So don't really remember much before that. And then I grew up in, surprise, surprise, in Louisville, Kentucky. So that was my hometown, and it was great. It was an interesting early childhood, as many immigrants have a similar story, where you come at and you try to make a better life for yourself and your family. And that's what my parents were doing. I was the oldest, and then my sister was born. She's about 8 years younger than me. And yeah, like any young child, very curious, very very energetic, and went to elementary, middle, high school there. In high school, again, this is so typical and standard for people listening, but when you do come here as an immigrant of an Indian family, usually you have a couple choices for your career.
Yeah.
there's not there's not a lot of exploration you're allowed
Yeah.
to do. So I don't know if you are familiar with those pressures. You're a lot younger than me. I think it's changed over time, hopefully, but
Yeah.
um,
Doctor, lawyer, engineer. Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer. So mine was doctor, and that is what I was going to be. Some interests that you mentioned, all of us do. We have hobbies, passions, other things that we're good at. Knowing your natural strengths is really important. Knowing what excites you and brings you joy is really important. So at that high school or middle school, or in my childhood, I think I really loved a couple things. Like I loved acting, and I was president of the drama club. I love speaking, public speaking. So I was on the speech team, and did that very actively. And so there were things I was drawn to. Uh, and I don't know if that would have been kind of where my career would have headed if I wasn't, meant to be a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's so cool about it, I think, is I loved medicine. I loved the idea. I was fortunate. I was the fortunate one who actually was excited about going down that path.
Yeah.
And I loved the idea of being a doctor. I loved science was my favorite subject, and I was good at it. And I really enjoyed the idea of helping families. And so did choose to go into medicine. Got into one of those great guaranteed medical school programs.
Wait,
And
before you get there, can I ask you
okay,
some
yeah,
questions? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask
Um,
me more childhood questions.
yeah.
Go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm interested, I don't think Louisville had a lot of, you know, a big brown or Indian population in the
Right.
80s and 90s. I'm curious, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I didn't think you were going to go that deep, but here we go. Here we go. So you were very correct. There wasn't a large um, population that looked like me, and there. some of my early memories, I do remember that, being teased, made fun of, bullied. Those are very strong memories that I think many of us end up having when we're a little different than everyone else around us. And those are very challenging times, and they do define you in ways, and both positive and negative. And so that was hard. It's hard to be different always. It's hard to, look different, but eat differently, do different things. And that's always makes life a little bit tougher. And yeah, you do your best, right? I mean, I definitely did not dress the same or talk the same. And inviting people over, obviously different foods are cooked in my house, and we were vegetarian, and there wasn't but much vegetarian food way back then in Louisville, Kentucky. So there were a lot of things that made you feel different. And it was something that you just kind of sucked up because you're going through, your parents are working their butts off to try to just
Yeah.
make a living. It wasn't like you're going to go and do some super complaining,
Yeah.
so fortunately there was an Indian community, and fortunately even in our neighborhood, I had some really close friends. So I think what's key, if you are one of those kids that feels a bit different, or has a different background, I think a key is, you need some support system, right? You need somewhere to go, or some people who really do care about you and support you. And I think even having one or two people like that, outside of course your immediate family, is really validating and really important. And so I did have a always throughout elementary, middle, and high school, I can name my one or two friends, that were super close, in each of those facets of life. Also, my parents worked a lot. I mean, my mom worked full time back then, and it was hard. I mean, I'd come home alone. I was one of those latchkey kids, and then I started taking care of my little sister, and so teaches you responsibility, I guess, pretty early on, which is a positive in ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would say, just focusing in on those moments, I guess, help define your own self-esteem. And I'll be honest, I mean, my self-esteem was pretty low as I grew up and as I was in high school, and that stays with you for a while. And I think that is an important point to bring up, because there is a lot now that we know, and in mindfulness and self-awareness, that there is growth potential. And the earlier we start that with children, when we talk about school and learning things like math and science, and but also learning a little bit more about that in schools, I think is really important. And I've seen it start in my kids' schools here, which is excellent. Really trying to expose kids at an early stage, because everybody's got something. Everyone's going through something. And so when you are, how do you look inside? How do you build your own personal self-esteem and self-worth and self-trust? And yeah, those are very important skill sets. There you go. I went
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially you mentioned your kids too.
Yeah.
How have you balanced, did you hide your Indian culture when you were in public or in things of that nature? And what advice are you giving, um, to your kids or kid? I don't know, but
Yeah.
um,
I have two kids.
two kids. Yeah.
I have a son and a daughter.
Awesome.
My son is a freshman in college,
Oh,
so
nice.
they're grown up. They're
Yeah.
getting grown up. He's an adult, and then my daughter is a freshman in high school. So,
Awesome.
so they're older now, and it's really fascinating because I grew up here, so I would, eventually it's pretty assimilated, and my husband also grew up here, and so although my kids have familiarity with the Indian culture, it wasn't as intense in their lives as it was in ours, right? Because we speak English at home and we cook everything, and we do have Indian food occasionally, but it's not, I'm not doing the normal making rotis at home.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
working And so
Yeah.
it's a different world, and I definitely don't hide it. I don't want to hidden. It's actually really interesting because like when I was growing up, I wish it was hidden and sometimes so that I didn't look or seem different to others. But then when you grow up, you're almost like, oh my gosh, I got to hold on to it a little bit,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
I don't even know if my kids are going to know anything about
Yeah.
it. So it's really fascinating how you change, but you want to give your children a very normal life. I mean, they're Indian, but they're American,
Yeah.
and they feel more American than they feel Indian, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. That we're living here in America, and I want them to feel very comfortable in that way. So it's interesting because I think they too are proud of their heritage, but still are very, very comfortable and did a lot of things that you wish you would have done. Like they're both very athletic and played a lot of sports, which is atypical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like what is it that you wish you had an opportunity to explore a little more, and you try to do your best to give that to your kids, and in the same way, as we, once, I'm a doctor and my husband's a doctor, and we're not, struggling to make ends meet, and there's not that pressure on the kids, like we didn't come here to make them a better life, or that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah. Yeah.
pressure piece. So it's interesting because you just kind of let them be a little bit more and
Mm.
find their passions and what they really, really, get excited about, and be curious and try different things. And I think encouraging that is really just critical, because in the end, all we all want is for our kids to be, happy,
Yeah.
and that's what really matters. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No,
what I'm
that's a
going for. I
yeah.
don't know. You
I
talk to them, they'll say the same thing, but
yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great
try it.
answer. No, that's a great answer, especially from the parents' perspective. Obviously science has been a big part of your later life. I'm curious, especially the things that this is just for fun,
Yeah.
just to reflect on, but was allergy or asthma something that you dealt with as a kid, or is this all come later in life?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think this is so important for your listeners, because how do you figure that out? How do you figure out your passion, and how do you figure out what your goal is? And I think we all are constantly in search of that. What am I here? What am I meant to do with this time I have here on Earth? And so for me, when I went towards medicine, I really was drawn to everything. I loved all aspects of it, but I really loved pediatrics. And so I chose pediatrics as my specialty. I went from med school, I ended up going to Florida for a year. Then I went to Seattle, Washington, and finished my residency there in pediatrics. And Seattle was a very, very big research, it still is a big research center. And so I got the research bug. And for everyone listening, the research bug is really just being curious and asking questions. And why do we do this way? And, so much of what we're taught in medicine is just stuff that we've done forever. And it seems to work. There's no, that it doesn't work. And so we just keep doing it, right? But until the person comes in and is like, well, why? And is there a better way? One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and she says, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. But if nobody asks, then no one's going to know. So I am always pushing, and my absolute favorite thing to do is mentoring and supporting young people. And I'll tell you in what ways we do that, and what opportunities we have. But keep asking questions and being curious. And as you go on doing that, you'll find that one or two of those curious questions really excites you,
Mm.
like to try to find the answer to. And then find your team to help you find the answer. So I got that research bug in Seattle, and then moved to Boston and did a research fellowship and got my master's in public health. So that was where I really learned how to do research, and it was then the rest of my life. And so now your big question. So I wanted to get into why research, because a lot of people go into medicine to be a doctor,
Yeah.
and although I am a doctor, I am a pediatrician, but I spend the majority of my time in research. And how allergy came about is really interesting because I was in my fellowship in Boston and I didn't know what I wanted to research, but you got to figure it out, right? Because in order to do successful research, you have to have an area that you want to become an expert in and that you're passionate about. And you have to have three things. The second thing is you have to have funding. You have to find something that you're passionate about that people are willing to pay you to work on. And then the third thing is you have to have good mentorship, right? You have to have someone who can help support you learn and get farther along. So it's kind of this triangle I learned when I was a fellow. And so your own passion, some way of getting it funded, and then good mentors, And so as I searched, I had my son by then, and he was an infant, and I loved all healthcare issues in infancy, right? Like, so he was in daycare and we had so many issues. And I was like, I want to study all the issues in daycare and how do we support daycare centers? Well, turns out the way our system works and the NIH works, there's no broad category. You kind of have to pick a disease, in order to then apply for funding for that disease specific thing. So I learned that early on. So then I'm like, okay, what disease do I pick? And in the hospitals, when you're a pediatrician, one of the top things you see is asthma. And you see, it's one of the number one reasons kids get admitted in children's hospitals. And you see tons of disparities in care. You see higher percentages in low-income minority kids. And it was very frustrating for me because I consistently saw this. And then you start asking your questions. Why? Why are so many kids, when we have so many good treatments for asthma, why do we have so many kids getting hospitalized for it and having exacerbations, and why is a disproportionate number low-income minority, when they should be able to get their meds covered by insurance, and, all these questions. So again, start asking questions. Then I moved to Chicago to work with one of the top researchers in asthma and asthma disparities. And that was great. And so we moved to Chicago. And in my first year in Chicago, as I guess fate would have it, I met a family who had two young kids with food allergies. And this couple, they were just so passionate about food allergies. And we were talking about it. And they're like, there needs to be more research in this space. There's like literally no research being done in food allergies right now. And they were huge advocates for, we need more research. And so just kind of, again, curiosity, like, oh, really? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I didn't learn much about food allergy when I was in med school. So maybe you're right. And so when I started looking at the literature, we didn't even know how many kids had food allergy in the US. Like, those numbers were not being collected like asthma and other conditions by the government. So, part of my inkling to go into the space was maybe it's a space where I can actually have an impact, right? Because I know asthma. I'm studying asthma. It's related to asthma. It's part of the atopic spectrum. So eczema, allergies, environmental, and food, and asthma all kind of go along together. And if you have one, you have a higher chance of having the other. There's my science for you. Yeah. And so if you, so I was like, well, maybe, I have the skill set now to work in this space and try to help move it forward. So that's kind of how food allergies became such a big part of my life. Now, again, as fate would have it, just rolling along, my son's doing well, and now I have a daughter, and my daughter is around 1 and playing with my son, and he's eating his PB&J, and he's got his sticky peanut buttery hands, and he touches my daughter, and she breaks out in hives and throws up. And so he must have been playing with her, hitting her face and got some peanut butter in her mouth. And lo and behold, I am now a parent of a child with food allergies. Yeah. As I continue to study. And this was about 3 years into me studying it. So pretty much after that, it became everything, in my life, because I lived it at home, I studied it at work, and I saw patients with it. So that's my story.
That's awesome. That was great. That's cool. Um, Rewinding a little bit, You know, every year, a lot of people are pre-med throughout the world. You got your bachelor's in biology. Do you have any pieces of advice for the undergrad who is pre-med on just their journey and things of that nature and the med school process?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so much. I mean, I feel like this day and age, and I guess forever. I mean, pre-med is a very difficult track, so it takes a lot of hard work and commitment. So anyone who is, that's awesome that you've chosen that. First, make sure that's really what you want to do, So I would, think hard about it, and make sure it's not just out of pressure, I guess, and because it makes it challenging. Now, if it is out of pressure and you have to do it, then the other thing I would think about is what careers align with your passions, right? So I'll give you, so going back to my story, I love acting and public speaking, and I went into research, and now I get to talk to people a lot and give talks to my peers at conferences. Or what I love and what makes it so fun is things like this, right? Talking to real people and talking to the general public and talking to families with food allergy or families with asthma, and being able to convey medical information in a way people can understand, and having real conversations with them where I get to hear what they feel like is missing, and I get to take that back to my lab and try to make the world a little bit better for them. So that's where I feel like I integrated this other passion of mine and this other love, because I feel like, in the field of medicine, a lot of times when you're in the front lines, you don't necessarily love, being in front of people, right? You're and
Yeah.
so it use your passions and your talents, and figure out, because now when you go into medicine, you can be a doctor in practice, you can be in academic and doing research, you can be in business, like as a physician, you can pretty much do anything, right? So wherever you have an interest, can be an administrator, hospital administrator, practice administrator. So think about, and you don't have to know this as an undergrad, but know that the world is open for you, right? Like, so after you go into medicine, it's not like, oh, you got to join a practice, and, like, that's awesome. That's a great way to go. But there is a whole, so many potential jobs you can have as a doctor. So that's one thing, because I don't think people often think about. I didn't think about that. I didn't
Yeah.
even know this world of research and how you become a researcher. I didn't know it existed. I could have never dreamt I'd be doing what I'm doing today back then.
Yeah.
The other things that are really important for undergrad students interested in medicine, just get that exposure. So get exposure in research, get exposure, in what your life may be like. Find people at your university, whether it be professors or people like me, researchers out there, or people in practice, um, and keep learning, more and more about what you're about to get yourself into.
Mhm.
It's really challenging. So give yourself, don't beat yourself up. I mean, it's really, really hard to get great grades. And a lot of these students are type A and really are competitive. And I remember after undergrad, when I started med school, and this is actually really important. So I started med school. I did well in undergrad, but I was in a guaranteed program. It wasn't really stressful. I was at University of Louisville, which was awesome to be in a school that was not super high pressure. And so then I went to med school feeling all proud of myself now.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh, and I start med school, and oh my God, all of a sudden I get my scores back for the first, couple exams, and I'm nowhere near the top,
Mhm.
and I tell you, those first 6 months of med school were some of the hardest of my entire life, because I had to just kind of reshape my um, my expectations, right? Like, I worked so hard, harder than I ever have worked, and I could not stay in that top tier. And I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't enjoying myself at all. And so know that that could happen. I mean, you may be one who stays in that top tier, but hey, what do they call the person who finishes last in med school?
Yeah, doctor.
Yeah. So, so I think, not that, I'm telling you to do that, but you have to then during med school find, what it is. You got to find something to keep you going. If, for my husband, he loved the topics and he loved studying them. I didn't. There were some I liked, there's some that are really physiology I love. There's certain things that were really interesting, but others were, micro and yeah, I could have totally done without.
Yeah.
So what I did in med school was get involved. So I joined clubs. What I loved is leadership. I joined the AMA and the American Medical Women's Association, and I, became president, of the national on a, or not on a, I became an officer on the national level, and I became, officer at my local levels. I helped develop programs where we would go to schools and educate underserved students about, careers in health and about their health. And I would go out to high schools during med school and do these programs. I got a grant to create a domestic violence handbook because I noticed that when I'd see patients in the ER, I'd be really nervous. And even though you think this may be a victim of domestic violence, you didn't know what to say, right? You're just a medical student. So,
Yeah.
I got a little grant and I created a handbook to help students know what questions to ask, what resources to give. So find things that you're passionate about. Yeah, that took my time, and it took my time away from just sitting and studying. And I had to be okay with my grades not being at the absolute top and me being, somewhere in the middle. But I was happy again, like I was doing what I wanted to do in my career, which is make a difference in the world in some way, for some students or for, the population at some level. And when I got to do a little bit of that, along with studying really hard and letting your grades, be what they are, it just made my own personal life so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you approach anything different if you were to go back and do it again?
I know those are those like, what do you wish you knew? Yes, I would definitely do some things differently. I think one thing I want everyone out there to know is, we all have something called the imposter syndrome. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what is it?
It's not feeling like you deserve to be in a place, or
Yep.
feeling self-conscious about, I guess in this example, if you got into med school, still feeling self-conscious that you're not smart enough to be there.
You got it. Good job. See there, I got to do a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Quizzing of you. Awesome. So I think that's so common, and you still have it all your whole life. Like, sometimes I feel it today as, I lead the center and some big research projects, and you think, well, why do I deserve to do this? And I think one thing is just know that everybody has it, right? And no matter how confident they act or look, we're always doubting ourselves to some extent, and that's okay to do. It's good to be self-aware and doubt yourself and reevaluate. You're always coming back and reevaluating and calibrating again. And so I think know that you are just the same as everyone else, and you have skill sets that others don't, and they have skill sets that you don't. And I think for me, for a long time, I didn't believe that. And I definitely felt like I probably didn't belong there. And why am I here? And how am I going to get through this? Um, and I would give myself more confidence if I could, back then. I mean, it all worked out, but just for your listeners, I just want everybody to know that, unfortunately, when those things are happening to us, we feel like it's only us, and you kind of look around a room and you're like, wow, I really don't belong here, and all of them do. And you don't know that they're looking around the room saying the same thing, And so how do we make sure people know that, people realize that they're not alone, with the feelings that they're having of doubt or, self-worth or, what they're capable of. And so one thing I always push, we work with a lot of students. I mean, we have 20 undergrad interns coming to work in our center. So mentoring is the most important thing. Like I said, we have about 50 high school students coming that we're working with this summer.
Wow.
And one of the biggest things that I want to teach, because I feel like it's so critical, is empowerment, empowering yourself, feeling that you can do things, and you can do more than you think you can do. And that is true for everyone. I don't care who you are. And you're saying, no way, not me. And yes, you. Like I said, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing today. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. But, anyone can do it, right? Like if that's what you really are passionate about. And so follow those passions and follow, believe in yourself and follow what's inside of you, where it's leading you, and look for those clues. And a lot of those clues are like, oh, this is really fun. I enjoy doing those. And then follow that, and keep that going. And I think, sometimes we just put blinders on and we're like, oh, okay, that was fun, but no, I gotta stay in the lane of this, specific path, and know that paths pivot. And if you pivot, I'm constantly pivoting. If you ask me what I want to be when I grow up, I'm not completely sure yet, So you're constantly pivoting, and you should, because you should see what excites you and move in that direction, and then pivot again and move in that direction. And I think that's what makes life so fun.
Yeah.
Did I even answer your question? I don't even know.
Yeah. Would you approach anything different if you were to go back? And
yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. Now, I mean, join things, meet people, join clubs, talk to people. You learn so much, So take the time to do that, to follow things that you may have an interest in, and explore everything as much as you can.
Yeah. So you finish up at Louisville in '98, and you do your residency. I guess that's always a tough time. I'm sure it was 80-hour work weeks and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Similar question there. Any piece of advice for anybody that's currently in their residency?
Yeah, no, residency is tough. When I was a resident, we didn't have an 80-hour work week, so ours
Oh,
were
okay.
way over 100. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So even 80 is way too much
Yeah.
now, but at least that's a rule. So yeah, residency was really hard. I had gotten married to a resident. So my husband was a OB resident. I was a peds resident. Yeah, it's challenging. You never see each other. You're constantly working. You're always tired, but hopefully you enjoy what you're doing, because you're in the hospital all the time, seeing patients. And that part is really wonderful. The long hours, and it's a challenge. And I wish there was an easier way. I work with residents now. I have my resident clinic where the residents, I have a group of residents for 3 years, so I get to know them really well. And yeah, I mean, they go through so many ups and downs through residency, depending on what rotation they're on. And that's also a critical time in your life, usually, when, you're in your 20s and you're either, thinking about finding a partner or have a partner, and may have struggles with it because of how crazy your life is. And, potentially thinking about children, right? Because you go through residency, and when I finished fellowship, I was 30, right? So you're 30, over 30. So yeah, over 30. So it is, you're working really hard during those years where there's a lot of transition in your own personal life, potentially, So that is definitely challenging. I think, we're trying to make it better for residents, but again, keep your network, keep your social support group. I think that is really important, and give time for yourself, even if it's just a little bit of time. Always, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't really take care of others. And so, what's the saying? I think this is Maya Angelou too. or no, maybe not. It's just you can't give what you don't have,
Mm.
right? So you need to, and I don't think many of us are programmed for that. Oh, let me take care of myself, or let me take an hour out for myself, or let me go get a massage. But I think it's critical. You got to find stuff you like, go for a walk in nature, do something to kind of free your mind and get back to yourself.
How did you guys keep yourself sane in your personal life when you're that exhausted and that stressed and you're like, I just want to sleep. I don't want to deal with another human being.
Yeah. So that's what you do. I mean, it wasn't
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Yeah. I mean, that people don't even realize marriage isn't perfect. It's hard. It's hard work. And you work hard at it every day. And sometimes you just do not want to talk to your spouse. And sometimes you're having a fight. And sometimes, you're doing great, so those are all parts of real life. And also important to realize, just like your own personal moods. You have a hard day, it's okay. And yeah, so I mean, we made it through, but it's hard. And that's all I can say is it's hard. I mean, you have to then also. I remember somebody when we were in residency gave us this advice. They're like, not only, like I said, you have to take time for yourself, but you have to take time for the most important people in your life. So if you are, in a relationship or have a partner, this older attending once told us, go make sure you at least go on a date every week. Like you have to do date night every week. And we're like, yeah, I don't even know if we can find a day. But it is so important, even till now when, we've been married 22 years. You have to find time for each other to reconnect. So connect with yourself. That's primary, because if you don't connect with yourself, you can't connect with your spouse. So find time to connect with yourself, and fill yourself up, and then find time to connect with the people most important in your life, on a regular basis, and don't let it go for working more, which I think we all get trapped in doing.
Yeah. And then after that, you started your fellowship. And that's what you talked about earlier in terms of finding, allergy and asthma at that time as you're having your son.
Yeah.
Curious, what was your thought process with the MPH and the reason for doing that?
Yeah, I mean, master's in public health for somebody who may be interested. It was a fellowship. It was a research fellowship, and part
Yeah.
of the research fellowship was you got your master's in public health.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
And it was because getting that skill set. What you get is a skill set of everything, like from um, understanding how to do research in different ways, from surveys to large databases to analysis to understanding how to interpret data, like from large studies. Like all of that is so critical to being able to go into doing it yourself. And I really wanted to go into public health. I didn't want to be a basic science researcher, which is also another great path because we do need discoveries on that end. But that was not my passion. I did a lot of research in it earlier to learn it, and decided that I didn't like working with mice or animals, that it was very hard for me. And I wanted to work with real people and do more public facing research. And so getting a master's in public health is pretty essential to that. My husband was in his fellowship too at that time. So we were both kind of moved there. We both did our fellowships, and then we both finished and found jobs together.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And
And so
that is
then,
another big thing. Like when you talk about relationships, the one thing I didn't mention is when you do look for a partner, just one of the biggest things is that support, like support each other, and make sure that's there, because that is going to take you really far. And um, as long as you're both willing to compromise on different things, because, things are going to change, and different, you know, person's needs are going to be important at that point in time. So, as long as there's not just a hard set, I need to do this, and, you got to just follow along.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's important. And as the world changes, it changes a lot, right? Like, so our mothers may have done a lot of stuff, and probably didn't work as much. And then, we're changing, and now women are working and moving forward, and everything has to be, it's not like how you grew up, right? It's a new system, and you got to compromise and adjust and move forward, and then as long as you support each other and care about each other, it can all be possible, but you have to make sure you find someone with that mindset.
How did you manage being a new mom and being a fellow?
Gosh, I feel like the answer to every question you ask me is it was hard.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's yeah,
um,
no, that makes sense.
it was challenging, but
Yeah.
again, and we didn't have any family or any help in Boston where we were living. And so, yeah, I'll never, and we didn't have a lot of money
Mm.
either, which I remember we were trying to find a daycare center for him, and we were on all these waiting lists, and he must have gone to 4 different places, like someone's house, someone else's house, and then he finally got into the child care center near the hospital. Um, and it broke my heart. I mean, I'll be honest, I like cried every day when I dropped him off,
Mhm.
and for a long time, it stopped. I stopped crying. But it was, you felt guilty. And, now when I talk to women, um, and, it's not just the moms, dads feel the guilt too. And there's always that feeling of guilt. Like, am I doing enough? Am I spending enough time? Am I focused on my children or my work? And you feel guilty at work because you're not able to work as hard, and you feel guilty at home. So my big message is just get rid of that and
Mm.
just know you're doing the best you can. Do your best and let go of all the rest, and just keep that, because that is such a waste of time to keep feeling bad. Just know that you're doing your best, and focus on, I'm going to just keep doing my best. And they'll everything will work itself out as long as you keep that straight in your head. But there's a lot of unnecessary guilt, I think, at that point in people's lives.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. And so then after that, you began your time, as a physician at Lurie, as an associate professor, and things of that nature. Um, is there anything you want to say about, you know, your decision making in that after your fellowship?
Yeah, yeah. I really didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. And so know that that's okay. I was like, all right, I'm going to try out research because I loved being a pediatrician. I loved seeing my patients too. So I was torn. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do, but everyone said you should, if you are interested in research a little bit, you should try it first, because it's harder to go into practice and then come back and then make your career in research. So that's kind of what I was going off of. So I was like, all right, let's try it out.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I did. And so again, for people listening, it's okay, just try it, because you can change jobs and pivot, like I said, anytime. So I started out in research. I got into food allergy and asthma research. I was fortunate to get some grants early, but it's hard. And again, that phase of your life is hard, because then I had my daughter. I remember my husband was helping me finish my grant because she came early and in the delivery room after she was born. I mean, I was like telling him what to write. I was almost done with it. I was supposed to get it in
Yeah.
before she was born. Like, the goal was get this grant in. And so, yeah, so you do crazy things, to try to, but that's really hard. And I think that's why there's not as many women in academics and in research, is because the time when you need to make it for that is also the time when all of this other stuff is happening in your life.
Mm.
And sometimes it's just too much. And if you're taking on a lot of the responsibilities for, your child and, other things in your home, it is overwhelming, because a lot of research you do on nights and weekends, and you're just working because you got to crank it out. You got to get papers out, you got to get grants out, you got to get to a certain point. Then your career will be launched. Because if you can't get funded, so it's soft money, right? Not
Mhm.
hard money like practice. So if you can't get yourself funded, then your career is done in research. So that's grants from NIH or anywhere else. But if you don't get to that point, then you leave. So I worked really hard, and I was lucky, but I made it and got some grants, and then it just kept building and building and building. And then, I like I told you, I had a daughter with food allergies. So I was like crazy passionate. I still am. I'm so crazy passionate about this field, and I want it to grow, and I want to make an impact in it. I want to improve people's lives so badly. So, but that's not all I do. You know, we do mental health research and we do COVID research all during the pandemic, you know, so I am a general pediatrician. I love working on whatever is needed, you know, and even though we call it the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research, we do, you know, we've got we hired a clinical psychologist. We've hired a integrative medicine, Chinese herbal medicine physician, to work with us, because we need to do more than just, you know, the norm. And so during COVID, we've done a lot with mental health. We just published a big paper on mental health in teens and COVID-19 time period. That's getting a ton of press. We do multiple studies around things that may not be food allergy, but for food allergy, you know, we have put out the numbers that everybody uses in terms of the prevalence of food allergy. That's all from us. So 8% of kids have food allergy, 10% of adults. That's our data. Economic costs we've done, $24.8 billion a year. Quality of life of families, we work a lot on, and how to improve it. School policies, you know, we work a ton on prevention. How do we prevent food allergies from happening in the first place? Can we find something to prevent them, like early introduction of allergenic food? So we're doing a multi-million-dollar study with the advocacy organization FAIR on that. So, you know, we have so many just really interesting studies in the works, but always open to trying to find what's needed. We did a big COVID-19 study with the NIH to try to better understand what's going on in families, underserved families, and you know, trying to get more data on the spread and how people do, right? Like, so I am all about, I've said the word so many times, pivoting to where the need is, right? You gotta understand. And how we do that is we have a community advisory board. We're very close to the public, right? I need real people in the real world to tell me what's lacking. You know, what are we missing? We do a ton on disparities. We're like we have one of the largest NIH grants to look at differences in food allergy by race, ethnicity, right? So disparity is still very, very important to me. How do we support the underserved? You know, how do we care for them? Because there's tons of inequities, and how do we help make it better? And so, so I don't know, I could go on and on about the work we do. One of my favorite projects, which is a passion project, is we have a program in Chicago for high school students. And so we take 100 high school students and we do what I told you. We do self-empowerment with them, and then empowering them to know that they can make a difference in their communities around health. And so we started that program right before COVID. And then now we're going to, you know, do our next year. And I really want to push that forward. But for your listeners, I mean, you can do other things. I'm also, we discovered a product. It's like a probiotic scalp mask. And now I worked with our innovations lab, and now I'm doing the business side. I'm learning how to start a business, you know, and I'm a founder of a company. And so that's kind of fun. And then I just wrote a book called Food Without Fear to help the general public to better understand, you know, whatever food condition they may be having, you know. So there's a lot of cool things that you can keep doing. So that's where I'm like, keep following your passion path and whatever really interests you, and then try to carve out a space in your life to be able to get that done.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, I guess, you know, obviously I don't have a huge science background, but you know, you hit on a little bit, but maybe do you want to talk about some interesting findings in maybe your past research on allergies or asthma, and what your current research says, or any misconceptions you found, just anything that you want to say about that stuff?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't want to get too sciencey with your listeners, but
No, feel free to.
so like I said, we do three main areas of research: public health, data, and then clinical, and then community research. So couple things that, I would love if you have listeners who have any of these conditions, please come to our website at cfaar.northwestern.edu. And we have tons of resources. And one thing I'm most proud of is educational videos we made for daycare centers and parents of children with food allergy who have, young preschool age children, then elementary school children for school, middle school children, high school children, and now we're doing one for colleges. So the point of this is going back to that bullying thing that we started with, right? So a lot of kids with food allergies get bullied, and kids, I think, no one wants to purposely, I hope, hurt someone else. But it's funny if, you wave peanuts in someone's face or accidentally give them a peanut or purposely give them a peanut in their food. And these things are happening because they don't know how serious it can be, right? And if they knew, it could be life threatening and it could cause, a serious reaction. I'm hoping that would deter them from bullying a kid with food allergy.
Yeah.
So that was the goal of all these awareness videos, is to support kids and to increase awareness among their peers. So that's one great resource we have on our website. It's all free and you can download it and share it with your school. And there's teacher handouts around it, frequently asked questions and a guide to helping your students. So a lot of that work is really cool. Some of our large, but those aren't our large studies. Those are resources for families. Some of our largest studies that I'll mention is one. I think I mentioned we have a large NIH grant to look at differences in food allergy by race and ethnicity. So that is the largest study where we actually are having equal numbers of Black, white, and Latinx populations, and really looking at everything from what food allergies they develop, how they develop them, and then their medical records, so their lab values and how they present, and then also when they may outgrow them, but then also what their daily lives are like, what their quality of life is like, what their eating habits and buying habits and stressors are, and if we can, in the end, we want personalized medicine. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
So can we better understand different, populations to be able to serve them better, and so that's a really exciting NIH study. We have another one. This is interesting. Now I'm going to go into prevention.
Yeah.
So I'm really, as a general pediatrician, I'm really interested in prevention because there's one side of food allergy, which is treatments, which are starting to be developed. But the other side is, can we prevent it from happening in the beginning? And what has changed? So this is what I think about a lot. Like, what has changed in our society? Something has changed where we are seeing more. So like anything you change in the world, something else has to change,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not like, oh, we fixed this and now there's no consequences.
Yeah.
There's always consequences. And so we became really clean. We started, relying a lot on antibiotics, like for infants, C-sections became a thing. Food manufacturing grew. We're not eating local anymore. And there's like tons of pesticides and ways to make crops, grow better without. So all of these things happened pretty much in the last generation, and that's when we've seen this massive rise in food allergies. And then we medicalize so much in early life, before, like if you go, most of the world, how do babies sleep? How do you feed them? Usually when you feed them, you just take whatever you're eating when they start eating and you kind of smush it up. A lot of people, mom smushes it up in her mouth and then sticks it in their baby's mouth, right? That's what you eat. You don't have like baby foods and access to, all these things. And so in developing countries, we've medicalized that. We say, start with this one food type and eat it slowly over a couple of days and then start another one. And what are we doing? I mean, we may be just causing them to have less diet diversity and having their immune systems to fight against foods for some reason. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No. So that's the whole argument of the gut bacteria and microbiome,
Good job.
that
Yeah.
we have a lot less diversity, which is leading to, you know, I guess our immune system being more sensitive to
That's right.
over time? Because I mean, you know the stats more than I do, but I think the rates have increased a lot since the 1980s, the prevalence of food allergies.
Allergies. Oh, yes. I mean, now we're talking 1 in 13 kids,
Wow.
like 2 kids in every classroom have a food allergy, and 1 in 10 adults. And we're even seeing adults having more adult onset food allergies. So something in the environment is changing. Something's causing almost the switch to get turned on. And like you said, the microbiome is one of the biggest areas of research right now as a culprit. So what is it? What changes your microbiome so much, right? So if you look at early in life, C-section, because you don't go through the normal route and get all the bacteria from your mom, and then things like antibiotics, right? It'll wipe out your gut bacteria. And then foods you eat, right? What's that doing to your gut bacteria? And then if you get older, if you different things, there's so much hormones, getting an illness, if you get a viral or bacterial illness, how does that switch things? But you're right, the microbiome is one of the top top areas being investigated, and not only in food allergy, in almost everything, and
Yeah.
how it influences your overall health.
Yeah. Two things I thought were interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, that I think the science now tells parents of infants to give a little bit of peanut or like some sort of peanut, whereas I think the science before in the 2000s was don't expose them to peanuts.
You got it.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm impressed. Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm glad those guidelines got down to you. That's awesome. But yes, that's absolutely right. So we have a large NIH study looking at that right now too, because the guidelines used to say in 2000, the American Academy of Pediatrics published guidelines to say don't introduce peanuts till you're 3, till your infant is 3. And then not until this study was done in London um, did the guidelines change. It was published in 2015, showing that early introduction of peanut may actually prevent peanut allergy um, in high risk infants and decrease it by 80%. 80%. That's insane.
Mm.
So, new guidelines came out saying introduce peanuts
Yeah.
early to your infants. Now, the problem with this is, there's so much fear around it. And guidelines can be written, but it has to be practiced. So how do we practically help pediatricians, advise this, and then caregivers, parents do it? So our NIH study is just that. How can we put in a clinical decision support to help pediatricians and develop the resources that parents need to be able to do this? And then our second large study we're starting is, people ask, well, what about the other foods? So the top 9 foods, which this part's really kind of cool too, where your research can influence policy. So there's a policy, it's called the FASTER Act. It was just passed and signed by Biden, passed in House and Congress, that is now adding sesame to the label. So the top 8 foods are on the label. So it's peanut, tree nuts, shellfish, finfish, milk, egg, wheat, soy, and now sesame. And that was, a lot of it was our prevalence data. We showed that sesame was the 9th top allergen, and we published a whole paper on sesame allergy, describing it to help, because you need data, right? The government needs data to be able to base their decisions off of. So it's exciting to be able to be a part of things that may actually change policy. So now that policy is set. So now sesame needs to be on all labels. But
Yeah.
yeah. So back to prevention. So the second big study we're doing is, well, what about the other foods? Should people be introducing all of them? Is there data on it? Well, no. So we're starting a study where we're going to look at not only peanut, but egg and milk, which are 2 of the big ones. A couple of the tree nuts, cashew, walnut, and almond, and then sesame and soy. So some of the other top allergens we're going to start introducing to infants early and see if we can also reduce those food allergies. So I'm so excited, and I feel so fortunate to be able to lead a study like that here in
Yeah.
Chicago.
No, that's awesome. And you've also done some work, correct me if I'm wrong, where like you've been introducing to like teenagers and older kids a little bit, like a very small milligram at a time.
Yeah, yeah. So my
And they've been able to build up their
tolerance, yep.
yeah, tolerance. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well, so some of my close colleagues are focused on some of these treatment trials in our hospital, and it is exactly that. It's called oral immunotherapy. So you said it exactly right. It's eating small amounts and then slowly increasing that over time, to be able to eat that much, and then hopefully, we don't know yet. Does that mean you'll be able to eat freely, and you're no longer allergic, or at least you won't have a severe allergic reaction when you eat a little bit. So yes. So I feel like it's a very exciting time for food allergy because we have now prevention and we're starting treatments. And so there's just so much work happening that, I don't know, for me, very exciting.
Yeah. You have 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll just you know, wrap up. Ruchi, we talked about a good amount. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
Boy, we could talk all day, Arnav, but I guess I just, if anyone who's listening ever, wants to reach out to me, please feel free. Like I said, I love supporting young people and mentoring, and I'm happy to do that. And I guess, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and listening to my story. It's hard to get people to do that. So I hope someone listening is actually interested.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. No, this was terrific. Yeah, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for sharing your story. I know that I have many friends in the medical field who are, um, whether they're currently in med school or not, that I know will definitely listen to your story and love the knowledge that you dropped on terms of the journey. And I think it's just so awesome what you're doing in terms of the allergy research. As you talked about, there wasn't a lot of data, and you have, you know, created that data to be able to say 8% of children, deal with it. It's crazy to think that that wasn't even something that was, there in the 90s to be able to say. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you. No, and I appreciate you doing this and interviewing me. And yeah, absolutely. I guess my last words would be just stay curious, and keep following your heart and figure out, your path. And it can change, and let it, make sure it's okay for it to change and take different routes. But just keep having fun. And then I have to end with my Maya Angelou quote.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, she really inspires me. So I just want, like, as you go about your journey, one thing I always keep in my mind is, when you learn, teach, right? So whatever you learn, teach it back to someone, right? Keep mentoring, keep supporting others. And when you get, give, right? So fortunate to be able to get in so many ways, whatever that may be, and just give back to your communities. Because in the end, that is the absolute most rewarding thing that you can do.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you again, Ruchi.
Of course. Thank you, Arnav.